Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you asking me to participate. I'm really excited about sharing my book with you. It's the Legacy Journal, and it's a treasure map to your life and heritage. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. Um, it was voted or it received awards for having the best gift book, the best activity book, and the best self-hype, self-help guide. And I'm really especially proud of all of those, that how people uh, look at it. When I wrote this book, I had different intent in mind, and I learned so much just writing this book. But at the same time, everybody looks at it differently, and so I feel very honored that everybody appreciates it in different ways, and that it is being utilized. Just a little bit about myself. Um, my name's Albert Quihuis, and a lot of people call me Al. I live here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm a native, and my parents were native of Arizona. We don't find too many people that are natives in Arizona, and by all measure, Arizona is still a wild place to live. That's for sure. But I want to tell you a little bit about my cosmic moment. One day, our family would make tamales every year. And so we were in that kitchen and we had the tamale line going on. And I told my mom that I wanted to record this session, but I wanted to do it like in a kid's way for children to really appreciate. And so that's when I wrote Sophia and Pepe, the Parrot Adventure Series, which is Sophia and Pepe. Awesome Tamale Day is what the book was called. And then it became a adventure series because after that I wrote The Search for the Lost Art of Making Tortillas, Summer Adventure, Isabella's Treasure. And so you'll see some of those books in the back. The Afterwards, I wrote Better Than Me. It's a historical novel, and it's based on three generations of women. And so it's like the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter, and all the challenges that they had. And like every culture, everybody wants their children to have a better life. And so that's what this book is all about, going from having nothing and to be able to get an education and to grow from that. So that was really important. I've also written with a collaboration, uh, other authors, 14 authors. We wrote Journeys to Authorship. And actually, I think next week you're going to have that book presented. So I'm a part of that. And but what was happening is that I was doing a lot of readings. I was going to a lot of presentations in museums and schools and libraries and festivals. And in one situation, when I first started, I read this story, Sophia's Awesome Tamale Day, 12 times in one day at the same school. So I was really excited about sharing my book with everybody. But I found out that everywhere I went, at schools, teachers, libraries, educators, festivals, people would come up to me and start telling me their family story. Or they said, I have a story to tell, especially educators, they have so many children that they work with every day that they have a lot of stories to tell. And I said, you need to tell those stories. You need to write that, and I will help you. And I've done that many different times. But it's challenging to get people to start, because a lot of times you say, when is the right time to start? I have to really get in the mood. Even myself, I've been writing since 2008. And so, but even though like days I don't write, I'm still formulating in my mind, the next story, the next page, and this is all these things that I'm doing. So, um, anyway, just I encourage you to start writing. So let's go to the next page. After doing all of these studies and research that I've been doing, because I am doing my own family too, and this is the picture of my father's family, and this was taken about late 1920s, early 1930s. But I have found that like I know about my parents and my grandparents, hopefully, a lot of things. There's a lot of things I don't know, and the great grandparents, you really find that you know less and less. And so, but I want to share with my children and their grandchildren. So those are the five generations. So the next generation, so each generation has their passing, and then the next generation, like you know, is limited in the amount of stories that they know about their family. And so it's kind of a rowing generation. And so you need to know that. And so that's why I decided to write this book, because I really felt it was important that, you need to start presenting yourself. And 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 so that's what I decided to do. So it just kind of hit me that I needed to write this story to help people tell their stories, to get them to start writing. And so, and that's how this book came about. So what I did was I created a book that has like um, a personal part. It's I have like the first part is like 121 different questions. And the second part is more towards ancestor. But I said, why don't you start with the person you know the most about? And who would that be? Well, that's you. You are that person that you know the most about. So why don't you start writing about yourself? And then as you go on, you will gather more information about your ancestors, your grandparents and their grandparents. So, I think that's the best place to start because in 50 years, 100 years, if you don't write that down, they will know very little about you. So I started with some really basic questions. And so the first section talks about your name, your nickname, your first memory. My nickname was Alvy. And so if somebody calls me Alvy, then I know they've known me for a very long time. My first memory is probably uh, me sitting up on my mom's bed, when that was probably my first memory. My first language, well, my all the ancestors in front of me have always spoke Spanish. And I'm like the first generation that their first language is English. And so, and because my parents had such a difficult time learning English or not being able to speak English and Spanish in school, they were able to speak Spanish in school, that they wanted us to learn English first. And so that's kind of how that all came around. Um, we get into also like maybe you had some teachers that were really mentors for you or help you, did some special things for you or inspired you. I have a few teachers that I really appreciated. And so I wish I could go back and thank them. Maybe they didn't know how much I was appreciated at the time. At the time I thought it was, oh, that they're taking me aside and they're and making fun of me or whatever the kids thought. But I realize now that it was really important that they were trying to help me. Some of the hobbies that you have, did you play sports? Whether you join clubs, what skills did you have? Your first job, my first job, I did a lot of odd jobs, but my first job would have been a newspaper boy. And then from there, I became a carryout. And it's funny because a lot of those people that I met as a carryout, we're still friends. And so that's kind of a unique situation. When did you move? I think moving out of the house the first time is really a big thing. I did that because I was joining the service. I was joining the Air Force. It would be nice to know like what glasses you wear, if you wear glasses, if you have health issues, your blood type. Were you an organ donor? Who do you look like in your family? Well, people say like, do you look like your mother, your father? And I always say, well, you know what? I look like my brother, more than anybody else. But here's another picture of this is on my mother's side of the family. And so you can look at these pictures and say, like, what can I learn from this picture? And here I look at this picture and I say, well, first of all, my my grandmother's there and there are four daughters. And my mother was a twin, so they're in there if you can find two young girls that are dressed alike. And then I thought, there's a car in the back, and my aunt always talked about this car. It was a 1920s. Willie Overland. And so that was a car. So I looked at this, I thought, I wonder who of these men, four men, would have owned this car. And I'm looking at that and I would say, like, oh, look at that. It's an open air car. And so who's dressed to be driving an open air car? Well, the guy, the second guy from the left is the one that has that type of a hat. The other guys have a hat that would, with the wind, would blow off. So, and I look at my grandmother and and their kids, and they're dressed to be in a vehicle like that with an open air. So it looked like it was more towards winter, and behind them is an adobe home. But a lot of these pictures you can really learn a lot about. The next section is, what are your likes? Like, are you a vacationer, world traveler, adventurer? What is in your bucket list? Um, what are your favorite trips? One of my favorite trips was like my son and I, we went from Chicago all the way to Billings, Montana, and we saw everything in between. And at that time, I didn't think of I that there would be anything to see, but it was amazing what all the things that we saw along that Highway 90. I won't go into all of them, but we ended up at Custer's Last Stand. So that was kind of amazing. Do you like to read books? What kind of books do you like? Lately, I have been reading audiobooks, and I've been reading about two audiobooks a week. And it's really, to be honest with you, it really has helped me to be a lot more confident and I feel more knowledgeable. And so it's been a blessing for me. But, do you read? I know a lot of times you don't have time to read, but anyway, I know that in some way you keep on increasing to learn. Concerts, you like Shakespeare? I love going to museum. I'm starting to love more about art, wanting to know more. Music, I've always loved music. What kind of music do you love? What do you do in your free time? You have hobbies. What kind of foods you like to eat? Do you like to cook, to bake, or you just wait for whatever they cook, or do you like to make it yourself? Do you like to swim, bike, ride a horse? I Most people don't know that when I was a kid, I was an excellent horse rider. I had great horsemanship. Skiing, surfing, I think living there on the coast, you probably love to ski and surf, skateboard. So those are the kind of things you want to know. There is a sense of pride knowing your family's journey, experience, and history. And really, that is so true. So I really, you should consider knowing about your family. Maybe you do know already. Maybe you want to talk to your grandparents and do some oral history. I have your perception and style. You have friends? Do you have a lot of friends? Who's your best friend? Best advice for staying young, healthy, and wise. Your passion or passions. Your biggest challenge, dreams. Do you like to change? What's really important is having, I think everyone has like at one time in your life, a very significant emotional event that just changed your life or changed your behavior. And so that's really important to be acknowledged and to note, write that down, to put that down. Do you have a model and creed do you live by? And then can you keep a secret? Do people come to you and they're able to share their secrets? Or is there anybody that you trust, that you wanted to share and tell your secrets with? This is one of my friends. She's an incredible woman, and I really encourage her to write her story and in her legacy. She was a mother of eight. She was a manager in a large business, and later on, she became an educator and she taught. And she's just she loves art, and so I think as you grow as a person, you also grow as you find out more of the things that you like and enjoy. So I think that's important that you acknowledge that and document it. So um, the fundamental qualities, like if you won the lottery, what would you do? If your house caught on fire, what would you say first? If you found Aladdin's lamp and you had three wishes, what would they be? Do you believe in ghosts, spirits, supernatural, and the afterlife? Do you believe in aliens, having a sixth sense, past life, superstition? those are all, I think, important to know. I'd like to know that. That'd be great to know if my parents and my great grandparents, believed in these kind of things. Uh, I know they were very religious, so I think that they would believe in some of these things. Um, Superhero, historical person, who would you want to meet in past? You know, what talents would you want to have if you came back in another life? What has been your challenges and accomplishments? Were you discriminated, targeted, or hurt? You know, I I never wanted to think that I was discriminated, but uh, I think I have been discriminated, and I think not, but it's not transparent. It's discriminated by, you know, they don't want you to know that they are discriminating you, and I think, and many times that has happened to me, but once again, it's made me better, made me a better person, and so, I don't dwell on it, and it doesn't. Uh, hold me back, but it just makes me work harder. And that's what I wanted. And that's what I shared with my kids. I said, like, you know, if you have two kids that are in the same situation, same skills, same talent, and the same uh, education, you have to show you that you're better than that. If you want to be accepted or selected to a job or to a position, those are the kind of things that they needed to know about. What is the one thing nobody knows about you? That's always interesting. I love playing that game actually at parties. And who was your first love, true love, secret love, soulmate? I think that could be a book in some situations, but a lot of times, you know, you're this could be difficult because a lot of times you don't want to really share with everyone, those feelings. But there's ways to go about, these are things that you want to know. Is there any secrets that you take with you to the grave? That's kind of a difficult question because yeah, there's a lot of secrets that I'm not gonna. So what are they? I don't know. I'm not gonna tell you because I'm taking them to the grave. But okay. There's a friend of mine, Andy. He bought just a lot of my books to hand out to his clients. He wants them to to learn about themselves too. To document. And this is the second part. This is about our ancestry. I'm doing a presentation for the city of Chandler and their library. It's called Honoring Family Legacy, and I'm going to be giving that on Saturday. So these things are really important, knowing about your ancestors, their what countries they came from, were they in the military. My grandfather on my father's side was a miner in Mexico, and then he came here to Arizona. He was a miner here. And then on my dad's side, on my mother's side, my grandfather was he, you know what? At one time, they all picked cotton because sometimes here in Arizona in that time, that was everybody needed people to pick cotton pickers. And so I think I have cotton pickers on both sides of my family. But it was interesting on my mother's side. Um, he had on the census for his where he lived, it came up that he was what he did was um, he worked for the what he worked with the animals. He was a freighter. He took animals, at those times they had cargoes. And so they would list all their cargo and supplies, and he would take the horses and the wagon, go from place to place. It's kind of interesting that life. But anyway, from there, he owned his own orchards, and then they got into farming. And so anyway, it's important to know these kind of things for me because that's it's part of the history, but it's also part of your legacy. So they get into other things about your family, that what's they're like, the things that they enjoy. I'm finding out that my family had bought a property 6.5 acres, and they used a horse pulling plow to plant corn and squash and beans. And things like that. So it's interesting to know. I find that fascinating. I wish sometimes I could go back into time. This picture here is on my father's side, a picture, and he's in there. And so these are miners in the city of Duquesne, Arizona, and what I did was I used artificial intelligence AI to find out more what it was like living at that time as a miner. And the information I got back was that, you know, you woke up like you had to be there at work like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Then it took you probably another half hour, an hour to get to where you're going because you had to go down the elevator and then down a shaft. And a lot of time these shafts were almost a mile long. Then you had to start breaking down the ore, and then you put them into wagons or another cargo, another cart, and then you had to roll it back to where it was going. In this particular mine, they had to put all the ore in a cart, and they had like an aerial tram that took it to a smasher. The that smashed it down even harder. It was called I forgot what it was called. But anyway, I'll remember it. And anyway, and then they took that and they took it to a smelter and they broke it down even more. And then they purified it. And then they were able to send it out to the different manufacturers. So one time they had to do that by wagons, horses pulling wagons. And then finally, when the railroad came in, they were able to use railroads. So uh, I never knew that. But, knowing that about my grandfather and that journey that he had is really incredible. Meanwhile, at this time in their life, his wife, my grandmother, had like 7 kids already. And so they probably lived in a small A-frame house with one room, and they had a stove, a wood burning stove. And so you can imagine what that life would have been. So, anyway, and then it got cold during the winter time. So they always had to have the correct clothing. He had to have the correct clothing, and his clothes always had to be cleaned. And it's always had to be in such a way he had to have all of his tools there with him. Uh, and that was just for a small part of his life. So here we go. The last part here, the ancestors' journeys, challenges, you know, things that you want to talk about your family and what you're most proud of. Are those are kind of things that you would be able to share as you investigate it. And then one day you will tell your story and it will be somebody else's survival guide. So I always kid everybody. So here is a picture of uh, Mexico and the US. And I always kid because my grandparents came across Nogales border and probably around 1916. And so I said, what did happen? They probably came across the border. And the first thing they saw, the golden arches, there's McDonald's over here. And over here, there's a gas station. No, no, no. They didn't have any of that. It was quite different in those days. And so I just try to imagine what their life would have been as they come across that border like that. So these are the different things that you can do for researching. I was looking at my grandmother's death certificate yesterday, and I found out who her parents were. It was on the death certificate, which I never had known before. And so, I've been trying to follow my grandfather's trail first because there's more documentation to follow. But with my grandmother, she had 2 sisters, and so they both went different ways. And so it's amazing all these stories and trying to put them all together. And a lot of times you can't just necessarily uh, wait for someone to tell you something. You need to really look inside and know about the location, the landscape, the railroads, the rivers, the mountains that were thereby, how the buildings. A lot of these places were um, just wild places or they were out in the country, and it's nice to know that. And so you have to do that, and a lot of times you have to make your own connections or make your own assumptions to find out their true stories. This is the last picture here. This is this is my aunt, and her name, well, I call her sister because she became a nun. And so she came from Mexico, and so this is the Roosevelt School District. So Theodore Roosevelt was very influential in Arizona, and so this school was named after him. And you can see she's a lot taller. So she was a tall woman, but at the same time, I think they held her back because of her uh, not knowing enough English. And so that was holding her back. So she had the education, but she needed to learn how to speak English. So that's a part of that legacy too. There I am, believe it or not. And those are the books. That's like a fiesta that I was attending, that I was invited to attend. And so these are my books. The Legacy Journal, This is Better Than Me. And then here are my children's books. So, but listen to this. This is incredible. Living through revolution, migration, hard work, surviving a distant land is not just history, it's your legacy. So be proud of it. And that's something I'd always admire about my dad and his brothers. When they're together, they were such a sense of pride. And that pride ran over to their kids, and because they survived and they were able to accomplish what most were not able to. So I wanted to share that with you. My name is Albert Monreal Quihuis, The Legacy Journal. It's available on Amazon as my other books too. And I really thank you for this time. I really hope you I hope you appreciated it. And but I really encourage you to get the book, and then you will know exactly what I'm talking about. So, Arlene, are you still there?
Yes, we have, if you have any questions, please post your questions on the chat. And we just have a sharing here. Um, one moment. This is something we all can start or kids working on as well.
Yeah, this is really good because I was my I've had friends, grandparents who like for summer projects, they use this book to with their grandchildren. And so they're teaching their grandchildren about, their family and and then, and they're doing it together. It's beautiful that they do that. And I've talked to some families where they have so many secrets, they're afraid to tell each other. And even like my own family, coming from Mexico, I had to learn all these things myself because when I really started to wanting to know their history and their timeline, um, that's when I found out that that's when everybody had passed away. And so it's been challenging ever since then. So I really encourage people to share that with their kids and grandchildren. So anyway, go ahead. If you have any questions, I appreciate it. If not, I thank you very much.
I think we don't have any questions, but Albert, in your encounters with the public and with your relatives and friends, what really drove them to complete this legacy journal? Like, oh, I have to do this now, really.
Yeah, so when I first started this book, the whole idea behind it was to help people tell their stories. Everybody has a story to tell, and I wanted everybody to be able to um, put it on paper. So in 100 years from now, someone can look at that, an ancestor or a descendant, and say, wow, that's amazing. What an incredible life. But what I really found out too in doing this, that many people got or were able to learn about themselves. A lot of times we work so hard, we go to work every day, we have to take care of our parents, we have to take care of our kids, we have to go to the laundry, the store, we have to do all these different things, and we're in auto mode. We're not thinking about, who we are and why we do things and what we enjoy. And so one of the persons who worked on this book found out about learning about himself. I says I was able to meet my inner self. I was able to meet who I am, because we're in such an auto mode, just our only day life and survival. So I